You would think that yogis, of all people, would be able to maintain union in the face of adversity, for that has been our practice. Whether that's our asana practice, physical yoga postures on a mat where we challenge ourselves, bring health to the body, flexibility to the body, flexibility to the mind, connectedness to the spirit. Or that would be in our pranayama practices, removing the veils of illusion so that we can see more clearly. Or that's in our Gyan Yoga, our approach to refining our intellect, to increase our capacity for discernment, to see clearly what is true and what is not true. We are a group of people who are dedicated to establishing an ever deeper connection with truth, with spirit. Ishvara Pranidhana is one part, this surrender into the infinite, this releasing of our own finite will to connect with infinite will is a part of yoga in action. And so one would think that we would be able, of any community in the world that could be able to face the challenges we faced in the last 3 years, one would think surely the community, the global community of yogis, would be able to bring a certain amount of presence and grace to this challenge. And yet, we found ourselves divided. We found ourselves caught up in argument. We found ourselves expressing tremendous anger, even violence, inwardly and outwardly. We have been challenged to live our yoga in a way that perhaps we have never been challenged before. And the last 3 years, each of us has the job now to say, how did I do? Was I drawn into conflict? Did I live in the solution to the problem? Or did I contribute to the problem in some way or some combination? Where could we have done better? Reverend Michael Beckwith is going to give a keynote address now on this topic. I speak for myself humbly. I could have done better. I live by the credo of I no longer argue. I no longer fight. I no longer try to convince anyone else that I'm right about anything. And yet, I fell prey to unconsciousness at times. And my yoga is to recognize it, to say and make the commitment, I'll do better next time, and to learn everything I can learn from whatever came out of that momentary unconsciousness. So I feel we all have so much to investigate in this. And so, without further ado, let's welcome Reverend Michael Beckwith for his address.
Thank you, Tommy, and bless the esteemed individual sitting up here with me today. And everyone, Tommy, you did a good job setting me up. You could have gone 3 hours. Look around the room for a moment and look at who's sitting with you in this moment, this Sangha of love and devotion and peace and harmony and wholeness. Each of you individualized expressions of the Most High. And just say together, united we stand. United we stand. United we stand. This is a dimension of the theme that I've been given to speak on today, and Tommy has set it up properly and magnificently, that as a community of lovers of God and lovers of humanity, with the awareness that we're individualized expressions of the infinite. Individual, of course, means undivided. Individualized expressions of the Most High. This is why we love Lord Krishna, why we love Guru Jesus the Christ, Gautama the Buddha, and all of those who have walked the path, as they have perfectly reflected the divine order of the multidimensional universe. And we ask ourselves, if this is true of each and every one of us, are individual expressions of the Most High in this dynamic of polarity that has led to polarization, as Tommy has articulated here. How did that happen? How does that rise up? And we can say, of course, though we have emerged from the eternal, we were created in the image and likeness of God, and oftentimes we don't break that down, what that exactly means. The image and likeness of God does not mean we physically look like God, because the Spirit of the living God is formless. The Spirit of the living God is love and beauty and intelligence, life itself. It means that we have the faculty of the presence of God, which means we can think independent of circumstances and situations, people, places, and things. We can think independently of our past, the interpretation of our past. We can think independent of all that. And when I say think, I don't mean mentation. I don't mean regurgitating the thoughts we had yesterday. I don't mean the chronic thought patterns that sometimes dominate our perception, produce experience in our life. When I use the word think, I'm speaking of the inspiration that comes directly from the heart mind of the infinite, that carries us beyond our limited perception and allows for the overflow of the Spirit to take over our perception, so we have aha moments and insights and revelations that are beyond our interpretation of the past experience, that are doomed to repeat itself unless through our spiritual practice we become open to supreme insight. So this universal presence is up to producing an individual that can perfectly reflect the wholeness and the allness of the Spirit. And because we're the image and likeness of God, this presence cannot produce a robot. This presence does not produce automatons, which means we are left to discover the great divinity that was within us. And because we are left to discover the great divinity within us, we find on this planet every single stage of human consciousness, from the animalistic human all the way up to the avatar human. All stages are right here in the human condition. Limited perception producing limited experience, expanded perception producing expanded loving, giving experience. All of this is happening. So this polarity in this 3D dimension that produces a polarization is come from what we've been gifted as an ego. In other words, the ego is oftentimes given a bad rap. The ego, from an evolutionary context, is that which has protected this experiment called spiritual being having a human incarnation. Am I talking too fast for you? Are you getting this? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Okay. So this egoic perception has protected us because it allowed a sense of separation between us, saber-toothed tiger, woolly mammoth, when individuals' consciousness was very, very myopic, tribalism. We could tell the difference between that which would harm us. But we're living in a state right now where that limited perception of the ego must be transcended, because it has run wild to the point where individuals are feeling separate from Mother Ganga. They're feeling separate from the earth. They're feeling separate from each other. Feeling separate based on religion, colors of skin, nationality, religious background, ethnicity. All of that is to be transcended, yet and still, in this dimension of time and space, the polarization has run wild. Primarily, if I could just break this down for a moment, when we look at the human condition, we look at human beings living in one of four domains. They live in the survival domain, where the total instinct is about living for another day. And there are billions of people on the planet. That's where they live. They don't know whether they're going to stand on a landmine, whether their house is being bombed, whether they have food to eat, whether they have shelter. They're living under the vibrational aegis of survival. And they don't have time to do pranayama. They don't have time to get on the mat. They don't have time to sit and meditate. They want to survive another day. And so there are billions of people that live in that dynamic, which is why, Sadhviji has reminded us that if we're not living in that particular dynamic, then it is up to us through a compassionate heart to bring succor, to bring love and compassion to individuals who cannot hold the frequency of the next dimensions of life. And then there's the next dimension, which is adaptation. Adapting to circumstances, reacting to situations, becoming creative and resourceful. It's a kind of a reactive modality to the circumstances. And then the next modality is called transformation. And this is where I imagine that many of you are living. And that is, we know that trans means to go beyond the formation of our present life, which is the condensation of previously held thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, positionalities, all of that is enchanted or disenchanted our imagination has provided for the formation of our life, including karmic propensities and the like. We are here to be transformed by the renewing of our mind and to take on the frequency and the vibration of every single day of our life, having some commitment to be a greater version of ourselves. So we don't live in the frequency and in the vibration of seeking to be superior to another individual. As the old saying goes, true nobility is not being superior to another, but being superior to our former self. We live in that dynamic. That's transformation. And then there's dissolution. And this is very important, because once our frequency is lifted and we're living in a higher vibration, so to speak, I don't mean to romanticize that at all, then there is a dissolution of all the places where we have lived before. Oftentimes when you have an insight and a revelation, you have an aha, you have a moment of integration into the higher frequencies of life, sometimes your life falls apart. Sometimes all the things that have served you before doesn't work anymore. Sometimes relationships fall apart. Sometimes all the habits that you have had and the coping mechanisms and the defense mechanisms that you have used to hold your life together, they no longer work. And so there is a dissolution. There is a dissolving. And ultimately, you find yourself living between the transformation and dissolution, and you have the ability, of course, to absolutely respond to circumstances in the most appropriate way. Now, when we look at the nation states, we look at what Tommy has mentioned, even communities that had become at loggerheads with each other and polarization. Oftentimes, when you look at the nations of the world, which are the last bastion of the ego that has not been transcended, you'll hear unconsciously and sometimes consciously nations saying, I want to be number one. But as a spiritual community emerges, as individuals who are rising up in the consciousness of God, awareness, we transcend I want to be number one, and we say instead, I want to be one with the one. So we go from I want to be number one, which denotes a sense of separation, trying to be superior to others. Nations are very good at this. And to I want to be one with the one. So during this time that Tommy has talked about, great polarization, even in spiritual communities, the question that was asked was always the wrong question. People were asking questions like, what side are you on? Do you believe this side or do you believe this side? Are you in this political party or are you in this political party? Do you believe in the vaccine or you don't believe in the vaccine? It was all manner of nonsensical questions that were being asked, and the question that we want to ask always is, how can I stay in love with individuals that I may not be in agreement with? That is the question that a yogi asks. That is a question that an individual asks that's seeking to transform their consciousness. We don't ask silly questions. We ask, how can I stay in love with individuals that I may not see eye to eye with? And if we ask that question sincerely, since God is love, since God is the total givingness of the Spirit without any sense of withhold, and we're not seeking to be right, we're seeking to be in alignment with that which is real, we're not seeking to be right, we're seeking to be in alignment with the presence and the power and the love of God, then the love becomes the great solvent. It allows us to fall in love with each other so that the answers aren't coming from a figuring out mind. It's not coming from an intellect. It is, the intellect becomes a servant of the Spirit. We move out of trying to intellectualize the Spirit, and we spiritualize the intellect by asking that question. And so often people were asking these silly questions, and the real question is, how do you stay healthy? The real question is, how do you stay in love? And when that occurs, we will begin as yogis. We will begin as individuals in spiritual communities to come to an understanding that as we are in the frequency of love, and now science is bearing out what I'm going to say, that when a thought emerges from the deep resonant field of love and possibility, that thought is way more powerful than the thought forms emerging from a sense of separation, a sense of fear, a sense of being right, a sense of I'm all that, a sense of egoic rightness. Way more powerful. So what does that mean to us? That means as we fall in love with loving, and what do I mean by that? One of the highest form of love, of course, is compassion, but we have to mature to love to love. Heretofore, individuals have objectified love. I love that person. I love my family. I love the people that I like. And that's an objectification of individuals. But when through our spiritual practice, we love to love, and that becomes one of our highest priority, then in that field of loving to love, and coupled with the question, how can I stay in love with those that I may not agree with? The thoughts that emerge from that are way more powerful than the thought forms emerging from a sense of separation, which means small groups of people all around the world that are in love with loving begin to dominate the newest sphere of the planet, begin to dominate the world. And we become transformational agents of more good than we can possibly imagine. The overflow of the Spirit overflows the banks of our present paradigm, and suddenly and incrementally, we become, as I said earlier in the week, we become the tip of the spear of the transformational dynamic that is so necessary at this time in human history. It's not about being right. It's being on the right side of history, which is the unfoldment of the ethic of love and compassion and kindness, which no longer can be a theory, can be a hypothesis, can no longer be merely a belief system. A belief system can't heal anything. It is the conscious connection with this dynamic presence and the willingness to love, the loving to love, so that anyone who comes into our atmosphere of an individual who is mature enough to love gets transformed by the feeling tone of that connection. It takes courage, it takes willingness, it takes an inner desire of earnestness and sincerity, so that we're able to hold that frequency. Yes, I don't agree with that individual, but I love them. I love to love, and they're in my field because that's my call to love. I don't agree with that individual there, but their perception is as important as my perception, and two rights don't make a right. It is the total rightness of the Spirit that makes a right. And that means we're lifted up into a whole nother way of seeing. Are you feeling what I'm saying here? So that as we rise up and we hear again, that we are the individualized expression of the infinite. Individual, undivided, unique expressions, unique emanations of the Most High. God does not repeat himself. God does not do do-overs. God got you right the first time. And with the awareness that you're the image and likeness of this presence, which means you can think independent of an experience, which means you can have an insight and a revelation that takes you beyond your present paradigm. And with the awareness that the multidimensional universe is up to producing an individual that can perfectly reflect the cosmos in a way that's never happened before. And we're in this dimension of time and space of which all all stages of consciousness exist, even in yogic communities. All stages are there. And then when individuals, such as in the Western world, combine that transcendence of the survival instinct and coupled with greed and avarice and materialism, you have a society run wild with too much, billions of dollars, but still living under the instinct of survival and never being satisfied with that which does not satisfy. That runs the gamut. And then you have that dynamic, that pseudo power, that through malicious hypnotism allows for the social milieu to create a sense of false separation, so that the individuals can be dominated and controlled at a much easier level. But we are in spiritual community. And as I said yesterday, the spiritual community holds the frequency of the second coming of the great presence of God on earth, that we become so strong in loving to love rather than loving to be right, loving to be thought of in a certain way, loving to absolutely wonder what other people are thinking about us, and they're not thinking about us, they're thinking about what you're thinking about them, transcending all of that, so that we just love to love. We love to love. And if we love to love, answers come, solutions come, insight happens, life takes over. We don't want to be right. We want to be on the right side of history, the unfolding of a perfect spiritual idea, so that we can look at the people on the planet. If they're in their survival, we don't have any kind of superiority thought about it. We ask, how can I serve? Individuals that are still just reacting to circumstances, we ask, how can I serve? And as we move into the domain of conscious transformation, embracing the evolutionary impulse that governs all creation, with the awareness that once you step into a higher frequency, there will be a dissolution, there will be a letting go of that which no longer serves you, and we learn to walk between that space. Shoo, shoo. Say it, united we stand. United we stand. United we stand. Somebody scream about that. Feel it in your bones, so that we come to a deep sense of forgiveness for ourselves, as Tommy was indicating, where we ask ourselves, how did we do during the lockdown of healthy people? First time in human history where healthy people were actually locked down. How did we do? What question did we ask? Did we finally get to, how can I stay in love with those that I may not share the same opinion with? If we did not, then now is the moment. This moment. And then this moment becomes the vibrational platform to leap into a greater expression of the possibility that's waiting for us. Now, what does that mean? In the realm of infinite possibilities, we don't make anything happen, we make everything welcome. Meaning everything is already existing in the field of infinite possibility and infinite potential. We become the vibrational condition for that which is already here to spiritual community. As individuals are tuning in from all around the world, live streaming, and they're in their particular communities right here and right now. As a global community, asking the right question, we become the living frequency of the answer. And then the intellect is fired up by the Spirit. Our emotional body is fired up by the Spirit. Our subtle bodies are fired up by the Spirit. Right action takes place. Because it's not us thinking about what other people are thinking about us. It's not us desiring to be liked. It's not us wanting to be right. is us wanting to be at one with the one. We transcend ego. I want to be number one. To I want to be consciously one with the one. As we walk with that, talk with that, feel into that, we become the harbingers of the peace that passes human understanding, and we bring heaven to earth. Non-judgment of anyone in any particular stage, but loving everyone that comes into our orbit because we love to love. Peace and radical blessings to all of you. God bless you and thank you.
Oh. Part of the answer has got to be walking our own Dharma. Each of us has a unique purpose. An individual, as Michael said, undivided being. Each of us has a purpose of being here. Just make a sound if you feel like Reverend Michael Beckwith walks his Dharma. So, yes, and isn't it beautiful and inspiring when you see anybody who has the strength, the forbearance, the resilience to walk their Dharma? When you see somebody doing what they're supposed to be doing, you never ask yourself, there's no doubt there. Wow, that person is in their power doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so I wanted to start here with this concept of Dharma. And I wanted to ask if Pujya Sadhviji would speak to us from this yogic concept of Dharma as it relates to, or could be one of the catalysts for integration rather than separation.
Thank you so much, Tommy, and what a beautiful blessing to just be in this energetic field. Just take a moment before we move into another aspect topic. And just let that energy of what's been transmitted really percolate through you. What Reverend Michael has brought into this space, it's a transmission. Yes, it's a teaching also. There are takeaways. And it's a transmission of energy. And so just for a moment, allow yourself to just feel how the energy of you, because we're all energy, is sort of readjusting in a new way. I feel like, those little snow domes that they make with, the skyline of New York or whatever it may be, and it's a dome and you shake it up and the snowflakes go and then they fall and you shake it and they fall. And when you shake it, they fall in a completely different place each time. So from the outside, it still looks like, the skyline of New York. And yet, actually, it's a completely different configuration, a completely different internal experience because it's been shaken up. And when we get transmissions like this, it feels to me energetically like the very atoms of my being are like the snowflakes in that dome that get shaken up, and yeah, they're gonna fall back, and I look the same, and I'll be able to put one foot in front of each other in the same way and pick up a glass of water in the same way, and yet internally it's been completely redone. So just as we move forward in this session experience, allow yourself to keep energetically tuning in to where those energetic snowflakes of you are landing that might be different from where they were before he came in and shook up the dome and gave that transmission. With regard to Dharma, so that in and of itself is a 3.5 month course. A 3.5 month course, not just a long lecture, but to keep it in just a couple of minutes, Dharma is translated as everything from the right way, the righteous way, the path, the core of who you are. So it's everything ranging from how we live that is in alignment with who we are to actually manifesting who we are. So for example, water's dharma is to be wet. Fire's dharma is to burn at the chorus level. The Bhagavad Gita that I spoke about the other day is a 700-verse universal treatise on Dharma being given to Arjuna, who is a warrior. His Dharma is to fight a battle. So when Tommy asks about Dharma in this context, I think what's really important to realize is each of us is critical. And I think a lot of the division arises as Reverend Michael was speaking about this objectification. So we objectify ourselves, objectify others. We don't know who we are. And since we don't know who we are, we don't know what to do. Everything else in nature knows what to do. You never see a tree that's just sprouted out of the ground looking around going, oh, all right, so I'm surrounded by apple trees. I guess I'm supposed to give apples. Or surrounded by orange trees. I guess I'm supposed to give oranges. That intelligence is from within it. You can plant an apple seed in the middle of a grove of orange trees and you're going to get apples. Not confused apples, not apples with some sort of complex, not apples wishing they were oranges, but just apples. Because that's what the seed is. And wherever you plant it, assuming that there's good soil, assuming there's water, assuming there's sun, it's going to give you apples. Plant it alone, it'll give you apples. Plant it amidst oranges, it'll give you apples. That's its dharma. The dilemma with us is because we don't know who we are, we begin on the wrong end of the equation. We begin by doing, and then we start identifying based on what we do. So everyone around me goes to medical school. Therefore, I go to medical school. I become a doctor. Therefore, I am a doctor. Everyone around me believes a certain thing, subscribes to a certain perspective, holds a certain set of values. Therefore, so do I. Therefore, I am the one who believes this, thinks like this, lives like that. We're moving in the opposite direction. What we do should be based on who we are. Not that I'm figuring out who I am based on what I'm doing, which is simply based on what everybody around me is doing. or what the advertisements on social media that are based simply on how to get us to click here and buy now, what they're telling us we should be doing. So we're not living in our Dharma, which is why, A, the world is collapsing, because it said very beautifully that Dharma protects us. That's what Dharma does. It protects us. That is its role in society, is to protect us. But in order for Dharma to protect us, we have to uphold the Dharma. And what that means is, on a global level, this is the Yama Niyam of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, right? This is non-violence, this is truthfulness, it's non-stealing, it's non-hoarding, it's how we live in the world. Universally, how we live in ourselves. Compassion, honesty, generosity, truthfulness. Right? This isn't about religion. This is just how to be a yogic being. But then we have something called individual Dharma. And that's where things start to get sticky. Because a lot of us, and this is one of the things that makes me sad these days about a lot of the messaging coming out of the West that has well-intentioned, but not quite so skillfully, co-opted Eastern teachings and pulled them out of context. And so when we get teachings around, for example, if you can see it, you can create it, become it, creates a situation in which we've got a society full of people who are seeing, because this is what they're told to see, images of themselves in some very romantic, glamorous, fantastic, extraordinary, praiseworthy, cover of magazine worthy purpose of life, Dharma, waiting to somehow figure out exactly what that is so that they can manifest it. And Dharma has nothing to do with glamour, with appreciation. It has nothing to do with something that's going to put you on the cover of a magazine. It has nothing to do with something that's going to be prosperous. Has nothing to do with being lucrative, has nothing to do with something that you may get paid for. It has to do something with who you are. And so as we talk about unity, I think about the human body. You think, well, when we look at each other, the things that get the most attention are maybe our figure, maybe our hair, maybe our eyes, maybe our complexion. But as anyone who's ever struggled with issues internally knows, or any of our doctors know, the liver, really important, critical, core, central, kidneys, stomach, brain, really important, critical. But we don't see them. In our society, we're learning now as species go extinct the importance, the critical importance of things like bees. Yeah. Who would have thought? Bees. Bees go extinct, we die. End of story. Who would have thought? It's a bee. You'd think, very low on the evolutionary thing, not very important. Maybe if it's good, it can come back as a human in a few lifetimes. The truth is, it's even more important. We go extinct, nobody's going to die other than us. There isn't a species on planet Earth that is dependent on us, but we are dependent on all of them. And so when we think about Dharma, ask yourself, what is my role here? It may be the smile, the eyes in front, the one who people see. And it may not. And it may be the blade of grass. And it may be the apple tree. And it may be the worms in the soil who are turning leaves that have fallen from the trees into a soil out of which the apple trees can grow. And that is critical. And so we need to stop judging ourselves based on others, comparing ourselves to others, taking our cues of who we are from others, and realizing the importance of that. I want to end here, but I want to just end with one little example that living in India, I think about a lot, and for me it really clarifies the idea of Dharma as it relates to the world. You know, if you drive through these Himalayan roads, you'll see a lot of times people on the side of the road hammering rocks, big rocks into medium rocks into small rocks. It becomes the asphalt for the road in a country where we keep employing people year after year because the roads keep falling apart and we keep building them. And it's great. It keeps people employed every year. Now, you think, did this guy come onto Earth with a rock chopper tattooed as his, dharma on his rear end? But then you get a bit of a bigger view. And it turns out that this guy is doing 2 or 3 shifts rock hammering so that his daughter doesn't have to beg in the street, because he's decided, being uneducated, totally uneducated, he's decided based on whatever inspiration, intuition, that his daughter is going to go to school, not beg in the road. And so in order to have enough money to feed the family for that, he's going to chop rocks for 2 turns instead of 1, so that his daughter can go to school. Now, he wasn't thinking, it is my dharma to create a revolution in gender equality in the poor villages of India. He's just thinking, not my daughter. And chances are, given the way their lives work, he's going to die long before every girl in their slum starts to get an education because of the revolution he started. And it doesn't matter. But his dharma was clearly to bring about that transformation. And I love that example because it helps us realize you may not even know what it is when you are doing it. You may no longer be on the planet to see the ripple ramifications. As long as you are in tune and in touch with your internal wisdom, knowing, intelligence, blossoming, flowering, you'll live it.
Thank you, Pujya Swamiji. Pujya Sadhviji. She said it's okay, it was him speaking anyway. Yes, beautiful. I wanted to speak with Abuelo and hear from him. I'd like to speak and hear about this concept of expectation and agreements. I heard some very painful stories, even within members of a single family, that had been divided around issues to do with the pandemic. Whether that was where you think the pandemic came from, your opinion on that, or whether you should be vaccinated or not, your opinion on that. In the United States, in the midst of all this, we had new events in a continuing saga of extremely painful racial injustice and inequality. So adding to the mix, just so many extremely powerful and difficult topics for people to latch onto and divide. And when the dust settled from all of it in these families, after a number of years, many of those families came back together. And what I heard from them was that there had been unmet expectations, and that had been the problem. Agreements had been struck through a lifetime, and those agreements were not met. When challenge arose and position was taken, the agreement might have been, you're supposed to go along with me. You're supposed to think like I think and believe how I believe and be how I believe I am. And your reaction to this thing needs to be my or our reaction to this thing. And you're not coming along for the ride. You're not doing your part. You're breaking our agreement. This unwritten law that we've had between us as a family. And that's difficult to navigate. And so yoga has a lot to say about this concept. I wanted to hear from Abuelo to ask about nature and the natural world and the agreements within nature. What can we learn from indigenous wisdom and from the natural world about agreement, and how we shall navigate when challenges arise?
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, because at the present day, right now, that is happening, when we are understanding ourselves that we are here to join. So in this moment, we are oneness, because in this sacred college, yoga college, we are talking about very important themes that has to be taking care about nature. But which nature? Mother Earth, the river, the mountain? Yes. But at the first time is to know myself, what I am doing with my family. Between the indigenous people, of course, a lot of communities are losing the wisdom to be one. But we are trying to rescue the old wisdom when we know that nothing is separated. Everything it is oneness. So we practice compassioning to all the sacred worms, the virus, the bacteria, because we need to remember that we are everything. And that whole veins, worms, are part of my divine temple, like everybody knows and feels. So for us to be in that connection with the divine, with the great spirit, because for us the great spirit is that we are talking here about dharma and karma. Of course, now, after 74 years walking, learning, listening, because I want to respect everyone as myself, I can say humanity, it is perfect. It is on the perfect path, because nobody knows about the universal laws. But if we see the constellations, if we watch the stars, if we watch when one sits, last night I had a dream with Amma, and she told me, you please talk about the seed. The seed requires the sunlight, requires the fresh and the darkness of Mother Earth. To put that seed, and with love of the water, love of Mother Earth, love of the nature, lost, vibration and frequencies that sit open. And that's it, are going to be growing because she feels the love who is taking care. Of course, the agricultors love all these seeds because we know that through these seeds we can feed our body, our soul, and also our spirit. So in the dream came this, tell all that divine seeds that are listening that we are the most amazing seeds that God planted in this world to unite, to join. It doesn't matter the past. It doesn't matter the wars. It doesn't matter the ugly, the bad, the sadness, the horrible, that one day we know that is happening in another places. But we have something in our heart, in our mind, that is the understanding, the comprehension that each seed has a rhythm, has a time, and comes out when it's ready. So nobody is the same in the destiny, but we are unique, only one in the universe, like our master, our brother say. We are just one in the universe, and the mission of yoga is remember you and me and all that touch in our path that we are a drop of water, that we are a flame of the fire, that we are part of Mother Earth, that we are part of the sacred air that makes me talk, and you are listening in your heart. So this is that makes me to understand to be oneness. And the yoga help anyone that comes to practice this discipline to encounter that we have light inside of us, that we have peace inside of us. Somebody said, you need something to grow. The trees, who tell that? But they grow. All of us, we are like trees, growing by the divine lines, the divine laws that comes from the universe, and that's the Creator, Brahma. And when I talk about Brahma, I can feel the letters. And last night also, Amma said, just remember them, that everything in this world starts with the vibration of three. And this is, the begins with the letter Y, yoga. It means that we are joining three paths, three roads, three senses. This sacred temple, the physical, the emotional that we need to work transforming any kind of traumas, any kind of disease, any kind of that one day they feed us our consciousness when we were a kid, and they said, you know nothing. Shut up. Come on. Move from here. You are a child. You can't understand. That is a huge trauma since that moment, that we need forgiving, practicing forgiveness. When we listen that and we were attacked for that word, for that vibration, and say, it's okay. I listen this, I receive this, but now that I perceive the divine presence of God in my path, in my life, I need to join to anyone, to everyone, forgiving the past and sending my love. Love has no gender. Sex, yes, but sex is also universal and another theme. But when we are happy, it's perfect. Because happiness, it means that we are understanding that we live in that blessed to recognize myself like a cosmic seed, like a seed of love, growing by the divine energy of the Creator, and of course, the help and the love of Mother Earth. So for me, I love my brothers because through talk with us, we know what we are needing to clear and to be a truth man. Because talking with us, we know what woman needs. So we learn how to treat, to respect, and to serve a woman. For me, it's when one is really having the intention to be really happy. Because like man, I am happy. But the sun has the moon and show us that in this dimension we are two to bring the three. Our humanity, sacred humanity, sacred yoga, sacred disciplines, to be like the onion, taking out all the wraps that they are no more necessary. It's the past, and the past it doesn't exist. Keep in our memory, in our consciousness, is the pure light and love. For me, that is the answer. Universal love for all the creation. Can be the clouds, can be the butterflies, can be the worms, the bacteria. I'm having a test right now how people come to India. They were talking to me, wow, if you go India, take care because you are going to get sick. Sickness, it doesn't exist. Just start to flow, to open in our body when we are not believing that we came to a very sacred journal with all my fraternity, my family, and of course, learning from the masters because, remember, we know nothing, never, ever. We are pupils, opening the heart and the mind to really connect with the heart and say that we are oneness in the divine love. Thank you, and be happy and love wherever.
Thank you so much, Abuelo. When I hear each of these human beings speak, I'm returned to a sense of hope. If I have veered at all away from it. And so I find this to be incredibly hopeful, and I hope that you do too. This is solution-based. I just wanted to remind everyone, these are not impractical concepts. These are very practical concepts. That there is a way forward through the challenges that we have, and it has everything to do with the elevation of consciousness, steadiness of practice, and looking within. So 2 concepts come up for me, Michael, when I was listening to you speak. You used a term, malicious hypnotism. And that really struck a chord with me. The first concept that came up is that when a person wakes up from being maliciously hypnotized, that stings a bit. That smarts a little bit. And in that moment, or in those moments, or in those days, or weeks, or months, or whatever that process is, I'd like to speak to the process of how a person moves through an awakening that they've been out of alignment, and that perhaps someone or something, or they had placed themselves into a position or had been in a position where they could have been taken advantage of in a certain way. So the process of moving through difficult emotions like that, because that may lie at the heart of some of the challenge we all felt as a yoga community. The second piece of this is faith. A lot of people, a lot of yoga teachers and yoga practitioners lost faith in their practice. When faced with tremendous fear and difficulty and adversity coming from all angles, I watched many people abandon their practice, which of course would be, in my estimation, the worst strategy for a time like that. So I wanted to speak about the navigating of the difficult emotions, perhaps resentment, anger, and faith in what has worked before.
Thank you, Tommy. First, I wanted to give a shout out. Thank you, Sadhviji and Swamiji, for the invitation to be here. I also want to shout out to Agape International Spiritual Center, who has sponsored me being here to be with you during this time. So I wanted to say thank you for letting me come, and thank you for sponsoring me to be here. When we're navigating those difficult emotions, resentment, animosity, guilt, those particular emotions obviously are not a dimension of our spiritual practice. They are a reaction to a perception, and the antidote for all of that is always a deep sense of forgiveness, the releasing of the toxicity of those thought forms that have coagulated and become perception, ultimately becoming conversation and actions. So a strong aspect of our practice is daily forgiveness. It's not like one and done. It's not like I forgive and then it's over. I think that's a part of our practice on a daily basis. We look at what annoys us, what triggers us, who wronged us, who said something about us, or who we perceived said something about us. And many times, people aren't even thinking about us. They're thinking about what we're thinking about them. And so I think as a dimension of our practice, we have to have a daily detoxification. We don't go to sleep to the best of our ability, and some days we're better than others, where we are releasing the toxicity of resentment and animosity. Holding a grudge is heavy lifting, and having a chip on our shoulder is carrying too much weight. So that becomes an aspect of practice. Now, in terms of the faith in one's practice, what we have to integrate into our practice is having a practice whether we feel like it or not. Within the last 15, 20 years, in the psychological domain, the word emotional reasoning has become a pathological description of that, where people will say, well, you know, I'm starting a New Year's resolution. I think I'm going to take a walk every day, or I'm going to start drinking more water every day, or I'm going to eat less animal products every day, and then they find that they don't do it. And somebody says, well, why didn't you continue with your practice? Well, I woke up one morning, I just didn't feel like it. And then that becomes kind of an excuse, a kind of a reason. And people say, oh yeah, I understand. No, it doesn't matter how you feel. If you don't feel like taking a shower, you still take one. You wake up, you're a little lazy, you don't feel like brushing your teeth, you still brush your teeth. So your practice isn't based on what you feel like. The practice is what you do when you're in that high ecstatic state of, oh my God, I'm connected to the presence of God. Or, you know, I'm really feeling really disconnected right now. The practice is, I still practice to the best of my ability. And then faith is transmuted into conviction, and then conviction is transmuted into an inner knowing. You don't need faith. You don't need faith at all. The Buddha doesn't have faith. He knows something, you see. And so if we continue to our practice, regardless of what we're feeling, then we come to an insight, and we just know something. We don't have to have faith anymore. It's just something about us. And so I would say, I was thinking about a lot of things that were being said. I've always loved this statement by Guru G, Jesus. And he said, you know, there's going to be trials and tribulations in the world. Now, when we describe the world and the planet are not the same thing. They're not synonymous. The world is the condensation of thoughts, beliefs, opinions, points of view, positionalities that have condensed itself into worldviews. Two people can be standing in the same spot on the planet, but be in different worlds. So Jesus said there are going to be trials and tribulations in the world. But then he gave a spiritual practice. He said, be of good cheer. Now, be of good cheer is not pretending that you're happy when you're not. Be of good cheer is developing a spiritual practice so you're touching the intrinsic joy that's emanating from the depth of your being. Be of good cheer, as you were saying about the joy. You know, the cosmos, it used to be a story that God was lonely, so God created all these people. I laugh at it because we've evolved beyond the story now. The Spirit of the living God is so full of bliss and ecstasy and joy that out of that bliss and ecstasy, everything burst into expression from the invisible to reflect and to reveal that bliss and ecstasy and beauty. You see, be of good cheer allows us to connect with that. He said, there's going to be trials and tribulations in the world, but be of good cheer to the best of your ability, because I have overcome that world, you see. And something Sadhviji said about the man hitting the rocks. That's such a beautiful example. I'm thinking about the story of the laundryman whose job was to do the laundry in the community. And everybody just saw him as the laundryman. They didn't know he was a practitioner of meditation and Zen. That was his own private practice. So he's doing the laundry, he's doing his thing. And then one day, he goes to his master and he says, I got it. I've had an enlightening moment. And the master said, hold on. He said, what is enlightenment? At that moment, the laundryman stood up, his back was erect. He had a countenance in his face that was glowing with the presence. He had a slight smile on his face. You can tell that he knew something. What is awakening? He asked him. He says, then he asked him, what is enlightenment? And he picked up his bags and went back to work. So we have these moments, and then we crack those rocks. We do the laundry. We find what we're to do on the planet that may be different. See, the thing about that right and wrong consciousness that you talked about earlier, a lot of times people think that everybody should do the same thing. Everybody should do what I'm doing. She's an environmentalist, you see. Somebody else might be a musician. Their genius might be bringing a tonal quality that's going to transform somebody's mind. Somebody else may be a meditation teacher. Somebody else may be a teacher in the school that's creating an atmosphere for the students to really fall in love with learning. And so we have to get out of this way of thinking that everybody should do what I'm doing. But everyone, and that is to move from should do to meant to be. The seed. An apple seed is meant to be an apple tree. We don't say it should be an apple tree. It's meant to be. So there's meant to be's within us. And as we let go of the shoulds, which come from an external authority figure, which has malicious hypnotism. Malicious hypnotism comes from the status quo living, materialism, greed, trying to force you to buy something you don't need, getting more and more and more of that which doesn't satisfy you. You get hypnotized into that way. But when we come into what we're meant to be, who we are, and we're in community, Real, authentic, spiritual community grants you immunity. Community grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. Grants you immunity. The Sangha, the community, grants you immunity. If people are loving to love and are in tune with that ecstatic bliss, and that doesn't mean, addictive personality. It means touching the joy. The joy becomes the background even when sadness is passing through. And that comes through practice, even when you don't feel like it. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
As Reverend Michael was speaking at the beginning about the critical importance of forgiveness as a daily practice, I wanted just to comment that we don't forgive because what someone else did was okay. And the practice of forgiveness is not about rationally trying to tell ourselves that what someone else has done is okay. There are things people do in the world, and this is not in that category of, I think that you're thinking something badly about me and actually you're not. I'm talking about heinous crimes against humanity, crimes against Mother Earth. There are ways that people move through the world that impact us directly, indirectly, individually, collectively, that are not a product of my projection on you of what I think, but actually are objectively, we would say, adharmic, meaning not in line with Dharma. So forgiveness, because those still must be forgiven. The path is still the same, the answer is the same. But I just, before we dispersed, wanted to clarify that no one is saying we forgive because we have somehow convinced ourselves that what someone else did is okay. Because that becomes the myth that far too many trauma survivors live with, which is, well, if what they did was okay, I must have deserved it. There must be something wrong with me then, if what they did was okay. Forgiveness is a practice that has nothing to do with the rightness, the okayness, the wrongness, the non-okayness with what someone else did. It has to do with one thing and one thing only, that we deserve to be free. We are born as divine beings. That is our true nature. When we speak about true self, higher self, divine self, consciousness, spirit, source, whatever word we use, it is that within us which is indistinguishable from the divine, which is free. Grudges and anger and resentment block us from that. So we forgive not because what they did was okay, not because we want it to happen again, not because we're giving them some kind of a get out of jail free card. But we don't need to, because the law of karma is actually perfect. And it doesn't require us to be its note takers and to somehow remind the universe who deserves what because who did what. Our responsibility is to our own freedom, not to ensuring that someone else gets the appropriate karmic fruits for their actions. So we forgive every day, as many times a day as we can, because we, regardless of what has been done to us, we deserve to be free.
Do you want to open up for questions? Yes? Okay. We could take a question if someone from the audience had a question, I see a hand went up right there, the woman on the aisle. Yes. Maybe somebody could bring her a microphone. Is that possible? Her hand is up right on the aisle to my right. Yes, there she is standing now. Thank you.
Thank you for this glorious presentation. My question is, what would you say to my 84-year-old mother who daily expresses concern, along with millions and millions of other Christians in the world, that there's only one way to eternal salvation, and that's by accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and that this fire insurance is prerequisite to living? And how would you say it to an 83-year-old mom in terms that her Christian loving heart could understand?
Why me? Generally, over the years, when I have dealt with fundamentalism, and every religion has fundamentalism, I agree quickly and love. I never try to change anybody's mind about that. If a person if that's what they believe, then, and if they're living under the edict of the teachings of Jesus, which is to forgive 70 times 7, if the kingdom of God is within, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, the ground upon which we are standing is holy, loving all, Gentiles, Jews, everyone, which is Jesus' teaching, at that level, I don't try to convince anybody of anything. I just listen and embrace. Listen and embrace. Listen and embrace. To get into, at 84 years, there's probably not going to be a major change unless there's an insight through prayer where they realize, oh my God, there are millions of people around the world who have never heard about Yeshua ben Joseph, that brown-skinned Palestinian. People never heard about him. And they're not all doomed to hell. But my role is not to convince them. My role is to live as an example of love and compassion and joy and generosity, period. And I think that's where it is. So I would not try to convince your mother of anything. I would just do what Jesus said. Let your light so shine before men and women that when your mom sees you, they see God, they see love, they see joy, they see kindness, they see compassion. Yeah. Is there time for another question? Yes. Stand up so they can find you with the microphone. They're not standing. Very good, very good.
Thank you very much. I don't have many experiences of talk like this, but this is wonderful. And Reverend Michael Beckwith, there is an immediate possibility I see, and that is what yogis love it too, that they don't want to be bound by the borders of the nations. Because that's what's holding us. That's what's holding us from moving the information from one place to the other place, the love and the service we believe in. And by removing the borders, I mean one planet, one nation.
Yes.
And now my question is this possible?
The answer is yes. We are global citizens. When you're a yogi, a spiritual being, you may have been born in one particular country, but your identification is with the universal presence that is omni, that's everywhere. Now, what has emerged over the last number of years is the internet, and it has its vices, and it has its good points and its bad points, but it has allowed for people to talk to each other from all over the world. During the lockdown, just as an example, we have a youth ministry at Agape. It was a local ministry. It was the teenagers in the local area coming to the community on Sundays and during the week. But suddenly, we went on Zoom. So now we have individuals from Peking, Australia, Canada, we have all over the world that are part of our youth community. And they are friends. They love each other. And the border is gone. They're probably not going to be convinced to go bomb somebody that they love. They're probably not going to be convinced to demonize somebody because they were born in another country, whether it's the Middle East or China or whatever the case may be. So is it possible? It's not only possible, it's happening now. It's already happening. And so what we have to do as a community is not be bound by borders. Borders of religiosity, borders of cultural influence, past religious influence. We have to make sure that doesn't sneak into our awareness. So we're actually meeting each other face to face, God presence to God presence. So it is possible because I see it's already happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where's the individual? Oh, there she is. Okay. There's one more on the right in the back? Okay, you can go to the left. We're not discriminating between right and left here.
Namaste. Thank you. I'm shaking at the moment. When you didn't take my question earlier, I was like, oh, maybe that's okay. I can just sit. But I feel I have to stand up. So thank you for the opportunity. Because when you talk about self-forgiveness, that resonates so much because I try to practice it every day. But I find that forgiving others, maybe it's easier, but forgiving myself is very hard. And I want to be in the joy, and I believe in it, and I'm in it a lot, but sometimes I'm not like now. And I'm just wondering, like, a practical practice that could help when we are there. Thank you.
So, when we look to forgive others, the way that we help ourselves understand is that we say other people, they're doing the very best they can with the toolkits that they have. If the moment required, for example, patience, but their toolkit doesn't have patience. Their toolkit instead has impatience and anger and frustration and violence. Well, that's how they're going to respond to the moment. If I come up to a wall that has a nail that's out of place and needs to be hammered, and I open my toolkit and there's no hammer and all I've got is a spoon, well, I'm going to take my spoon and kind of whack the nail, not so well. But that's all I've got in my toolkit. And as we work to forgive others, that's a very good way to help ourselves think about it. That it's not that someone woke up in the morning and said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to thoroughly mess up your life. Like, I didn't wake up and say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just like whack this nail all over the place, really unskillfully, hitting the wall also. It's just the moment required something. I didn't have it. I used what I had. Not a great outcome. When we go to forgiving ourselves, it's so sad that we are so unwilling to offer ourselves the same understanding. Whatever you've done, I mean, we've all hurt others. We've all moved through the world unskillfully. We've all encountered situations that required compassion, love, understanding, patience. We didn't have it. We pulled whatever we had from our toolkit. Impatience, frustration, greed, ignorance, whatever it may have been. You didn't wake up in the morning and say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to thoroughly, deeply hurt this person. I know you didn't. I don't even have to ask you. And so what you need to realize is that when we speak about love and forgiveness and God and perfection, it is not, as I was talking about yesterday, universe minus you. It's actually a bit of an ego trip there to somehow assume that everything in the world is worthy of love and forgiveness and perfection except me. Like I am the one exception to this rule. And yet that's how so many of us move through the world. Yes, yes, everyone worthy of forgiveness but me. Everyone worthy of love but me. Everyone created out of God's perfection but me. And so help yourself. Stand in Ganga. Hold Ganga water in your hands. Offer to her water what you did, the ignorance with which you did it, whatever tool it was that you pulled out of your toolkit that was not appropriate for the moment. Offer that to Mother Ganga. And then bring yourself as much love as you possibly can, knowing that you are not, I promise, the one exception to the rule of everyone is loved by God, of everyone is divine. Extend that love to yourself, that as you would extend to others. That's your path. That's your yoga right now.
That was great. In alignment with that, the immature ego doesn't care whether you're boasting or beating yourself up. You're still the center of attention. So if you're beating yourself up, I'm the worst person in the world, I made this great grandiose mistake, the ego's happy. If you're boasting and saying you're better than someone else, the ego is happy. The egoic perception doesn't know the difference between enlightenment and annihilation. So it tries to keep you in your present paradigm. So all that Sadhviji is saying is that you're going beyond that egoic perception and loving yourself as the presence of God is loving you. God is love. So another way of transcending that is to think about someone in your life, and I know you have someone that loves you, that just didn't care whether you made a mistake, whether you received an award. Oftentimes it's a grandparent. Oftentimes it's someone in our life, they just get us. They just love us. And you ask to see yourself through their eyes. To see yourself through the eyes of your grandmother or someone that just loves you. And then begin to be aware that what they're seeing is a glimpse of how the presence of God sees you. Begin to bathe in that on a regular basis and then enter into your self-forgiveness. So you're entering into self-forgiveness with the awareness that you are totally loved, whether you made the biggest mistake in the world or received some type of great accomplishment. You can begin right there.
We're going to have to unfortunately close. I'll give it to Tommy to conclude. I just wanted to say, it's as I get inspired by sitting next to and listening to Reverend Michael, that, you know, whatever you've done is this much. I remember being in jail not as a prisoner, but as Puja Swamiji and I had gone to a jail in California many years ago through a devotee who was working in the jail, and we had done a spiritual program there, teaching a meditation, questions and answers. And Puja Swamiji said something very beautiful to the prisoners. He said, and these were murderers, rapists. I mean, these were violent criminals. And he said, what you've done is this much. Who you are is this much. And so even if you needed to be in jail for this much, don't think that's who you are. Realize you are
So let me say their three names first before we applaud. But Reverend Michael Beckwith, Pujya Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati Ji, and dear Abuelo, please give them your love and appreciation. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. To conclude, finally, before we go off to lunch together, ask the right questions, keep your faith, stay on your practice, forgive everyone, including yourself. Things will work out.
one very quick logistic thing before everyone departs. I know you've been getting messages and whatnot on your phones, but we are shifting the evening music performance to being part of the flow of the Ganga Aarti. So Vishwambar and beautiful team will begin on the banks of Ganga at 5:30. They'll sing prior to the Aarti. We will then move into our Aarti, and they will sing more after the Aarti, like we did with Gilran Shama last night. So your classes finish at 5 in the afternoon. Have a quick cup of tea, get a shawl, whatever you need to do. Come down by 5:30 to be with us for them to start. And then when it finishes, we'll all just go to dinner and an early bed.
Thank you, Sadhviji. Okay. Okay.
And a big round of applause for our beloved Tommy Rosen, bringing yoga, love, recovery on every level to